Hi Fordland, I quickly want to go over how to enable Tailgate Ajar on your modern F-Series pickup. As you can see, there's nothing on the IPC. I walk to the back of the truck. I open the circuit, in this case a test circuit. I walk back to the front of the truck, and lo and behold, the Tailgate Ajar warning comes up. And of course it's not binging at me intrusively because I disabled all my door chimes. These are all the tools that I took out for this particular project. While in the end, I didn't use all of them, I certainly used the majority of them. And then I just took pictures of them so that you will have a general understanding of what you might want to have laying around when you begin this project for yourself. I began with one of these generic Motorcraft pins. They are used in almost every connector throughout the F-150, DU2Z14474-DA. This is something you'll want to write down. You're going to go through a lot of these for any F-150 project you ever attempt regarding wiring. I actually happen to have a few pins left over from when I did my subwoofer install, and this picture that you're looking at is just a generic one from the internet that I wrote on. If you buy the actual pins from a website such as DigiKey and decide to make your own harness, make sure that you're using 22 gauge wire. I ran into that problem when I tried to use 18 gauge wire on my headlight install, which you'll see in a different video. So for this particular install, I had a leftover pigtail from the Kicker subwoofer install that I did and posted on YouTube. I took that pigtail and I just crimped a spade connector onto the end. Had I had any laying around, I would have preferred to use double wall heat shrink. Double walled heat shrink is amazing and often used in automotive applications. It has an inner lining of hot glue so that when you melt the heat shrink, it will also melt the hot glue and form a hardened watertight seal. On this particular day, I didn't have any, and I just made best use of what I had laying around. I think you'll begin to understand why I prefer this method when you reach the point in the video where I'm repinning connector 405 underneath the truck. So here's a quick overview where I just want to point out where the tailgate ajar circuit resides physically within the chassis of the F-150. The tailgate ajar circuit begins its life at the body control module in connector 2280E at pin 34. I suspect that all 2016 and newer F-150s will have this pre-wired at the body control module. The 2015 F-150s may not. In the event that your F-150 or your Super Duty does not have this wired at connector C2280E, you can buy this particular pin and you can run your own circuit in whichever manner you feel is best for your particular application. Ford will actually refer to the tailgate ajar circuit, or what it will call the deck lid ajar circuit, as CPL44 yellow orange. So in the rest of this quick clip, I just want to provide a quick example of where the harness actually goes in the vehicle. It runs within the cab behind all the HVAC system over to the driver's side footwell. From there, the harness extrudes through the firewall and comes outside into the engine compartment up to this connector. This particular connector is C316. On connector 316, you'll find the yellow-orange wire going into pin 9. The harness then runs along the exterior chassis all the way back to connector 405. In locating connector 405, I traced an outline of that here to make it easy for you. In this case, I traced out the frame in green. The red line represents where the harness runs, and the orange area is where you will locate connector 405. Okay, filming with one hand while laying on my back. Not the easiest thing in the world. Right, so this connector is already loose. I got in there with a screwdriver. You lift up on the black tab and you pull the entire connector assembly towards you. That's how you get that off of there. So if you want to figure out how to get this connector off, take a look at this connector first. They're mounted in the same way, and it'll just give you a better perception of how they come off of there. So I'm running iOS 12 with the light on while recording a video, and the amber LED came on and decided it was just gonna be stuck on. So yeah, to get the actual connector, the actual two pieces of C405 apart, it's just a matter of squeezing the clip in underneath. This one's already loose a little bit, but if you squeeze that tab, you can just pull off on the connector and the entire assembly comes out. So when I'm looking at this connector, right, all the pins are up in here. Good, I'm eating sand. So when you look at this connector, all the pins are here already. And again, what I was saying is if you look on the back side, let's try and get this to focus. When you actually evaluate the back side, you can see clearly that orange yellow cable comes in there for the tailgate ajar, door 6 ajar. So now that the connector is separated, we're going to take a look at the female end. We're going to take the white clip out on this side, and we are going to populate this pin, this hole right here, with the little homemade harness we have right in the pin. So now that we have C405 apart, from this perspective, the push tab is on this end, and the pin in question is right here. We're going to populate this spot on the connector. It's really hard to look at it from this perspective. There's no slack down here, but if you look at this up in here, and it is quite dirty. I guess you might be able to see it right up in there. You can see that orange yellow wire, and that is your door 6 Ajar. So I don't know if the F250 will have this, but the 2017 and 2018 F150s certainly have it at C405, and it's already pinned out. The pins are there. So by adding our little harness that we made here, right, just take this pin and shove it in there. We'll add the tailgate Ajar circuit. Now, of course, we'll have to take out this insert clip first. If repinning Ford connectors puts you into a cloud of uncertainty, Ford Tech Make You Loco has a channel on YouTube, and he has a very specific video explaining the general process. I highly suggest you go check it out. So what you would do in this case is get a real fine screwdriver and come in here and just pry out on this clip right here, right? And pry that wedge piece out before you can put the pin in. Once you have the connector loose, and it is just a matter of working your way with the screwdriver very carefully on either end between the gray and transparent white piece, this clip will just fall out and pull forward, right? Just one of these wedges. Set that down there, and then we can go ahead and populate our pin that we made. So I ran into a bit of a snag. I will have to come in here with a screwdriver and gently pry off this black plastic ring as well. You can get in on either side, up at the top and on the bottom. There's a little bit of a pry hole right down in here on the sides. And I got the black plastic piece off. The issue now is if you look right there beside the, this is where a pin's going here, right in here. And Ford has a black plastic plug in the pin. So I have to figure out how to get that out. That little black plastic chunk. I apologize for the shaky video, but it's the best I can do here. Let's try and stabilize this a bit. If you look in there, it's the actual damn plug. I don't know how to get that out. Or if you can push them out. Let's get some pliers and see how to get that out of there. Okay, so fun fact, it turns out you can just take a screwdriver and push it out. And here's a picture showing that particular plug in relation to the screwdriver after removing it from the cap. So once I had the plug out, it was then relatively simple to push the pin in the correct orientation and reassemble the connector in reverse order of which I took it apart. Using a little dab of connector sealant here won't hurt either. It'll help keep moisture and dirt out even though there's a rubber gasket inside the actual connector itself. Now on the F150 form, on the actual tailgate Ajar thread, I kept on mentioning that this is located at pin 11, but the truth is I don't know what pin 11 actually is. And that's because I don't know where pin 1 is. When you look at this connector, I don't know if pin 1 includes the 4 larger pins as well, or if pin 1 is grouped into the array of smaller pins. What I can tell you for sure is that the location I have circled here in red is the tailgate Ajar circuit. But if you look at a wiring diagram in the future, this may not necessarily be pin 11. It's the only part of the entire install where I've fumbled with uncertainty. There is no indication of pin 1 on the connector itself, and some of the wiring diagrams I've looked at are a little vague. If this is truly a 16-pin connector, then I don't think pin 11 is a fitting placement when you're evaluating on paper where the pin goes. But like I said, I just highlighted it, circled it red, and made it easy for you. Realistically, all you have to do anyway is just follow that orange-yellow wire into the male end of the connector. So here's what the lower half of connector 405 looks like, with the opaque white wedge pressed back into place to lock the pin into its proper orientation. So for the record, it's easier to get these connectors reseated and resituated back onto these black locking tabs while it's disconnected, because that way you're only wrestling around with half of the connector. So you just locate this slot right on the back of the connector, and then you just slide it back onto those tabs. So there's a very small notch here that the connector will situate itself on. Let me try and do this one. Right. And then you can just push them on there and lock them back on. But it's much easier to do that while the connector's still broken apart. So as for just testing a circuit, I just used some spare wire that was laying around, crimped on a couple spade connectors, and ran it directly to the switch. For this particular test, I chose to use chassis ground from the trailer plug. It was the easiest and most convenient place. This is where having spare gator clips around will come in hand. So now that the circuit is hardwired and ready to be tested, we're ready to program. But there's something I have to cover first. So I want to take a quick pause and talk about the different model year of vehicle. i8 Iridium has a 2015 F150, and he tested the code at 726-25-01, and he enabled a 6-bit. So on the 2015 F150, he noticed that on his sync system, it would show the tailgate ajar, but on the IPC it would not. What we believe is that the IPC on the 2015 has an older firmware that is incapable of showing or knowing what tailgate ajar is, and it doesn't have the graphic embedded in the software to actually display that graphic to the end user. We know that tailgate ajar is broadcast across the network to all the modules, but the modules at the end of that network may not know how to handle that data appropriately. And that brings me to the 2016 F150. Tailgate ajar on the 2016 F150 has the circuit in the harness, and it goes all the way back. In some cases, on the earliest production vehicles that roll off in 2016 from that assembly line, will have the circuit inside the tailgate. The circuit will be capped off with a loopback plug, and that can be seen in these photos here. So what i8 Iridium has proven with the 2015 F150 is that he can enable the tailgate ajar circuit on the BCM, and when he monitors the PIDs using ForeScan or IDS, you can see the tailgate ajar circuit in its respective states, whether the circuit is open or closed. Nobody has tried to enable tailgate ajar on a 2016 F150 on the forums yet, as far as I'm aware. In 2017 F150s and newer, the BCM firmware supports more memory addresses, and door 6 ajar, in this case tailgate ajar, is located in one of those memory addresses that does not exist in the 2016 or 2015 F150. Once we can get tailgate ajar working on a 2016 F150 and prove that it works by enabling that bit at 726-25.01, we should be able to then see any 2015 owner who's willing update the firmware on their IPC to a 2016 calibration and enable the tailgate ajar circuit on a 2015 F150 as well. It shouldn't be too hard, but the thing is, when you're dealing with flashing firmware, in particular an IPC, that is a topic where you want to reach out to Clusters by Livden Up on the F150 forum. He's a certified vendor. Once one person is able to prove that it can work on a 2015 F150, then I'm sure others will follow. The 2016 F150 Raptor will likely fall into the same category as the 2016 passenger pickup. So going back to the 2017 F150, in that BCM, in the newer calibration of firmware with the extended range of memory addresses, there's a particular line, which you're going to see me change, to enable door 6 ajar circuit. So in this later calibration of BCM firmware, you can define if the door ajar circuit for door number 6 is enabled. You can also define whether or not the circuit is monitored as being normally open or normally closed. The 2017 F150 Ford Raptor should also fall into the same categorization as the 2017 passenger F150, as will the 2018 F150s. So for those of you who are wondering how this all came about in the first place, the Ford Edge has the same BCM as all the F150s, but the Ford Edge wiring diagram actually defines pin 34 as being decklit ajar. So by comparing the Ford Edge wiring diagram to the F150s, we were able to kind of backtrace and figure out where this circuit actually goes. So as I'm getting started with the video editing with the programming side of things here, a user on the F150 forum brought up a really good point. Now that we're instructing the BCM to monitor door number 6 as to whether it's being ajar or not, if someone tries to open up my tonneau cover tailgate while the truck is locked and while the ignition is off, will it set off the car alarm? I haven't tested that theory yet, but I hope it does, and I hope it gives you some ideas as to how the circuit can be enabled and useful to you in your application. Another thing I should probably mention while you're watching this data scroll by in real time is something I skimmed over a little bit too quickly earlier. I don't know if the 2015 F150 has this circuit in it or not at the BCM. You may have to pull out connector C2280E and check pin 34 for yourself and see if your truck already is wired or pre-wired for this particular circuit. I suspect that all 2016 and newer F150s, including the Raptor, will be pre-wired for this from the body control module up to connector 405. And of course, some of those earliest built 2016 F150s will actually extend beyond that and be capped off inside the tailgate. In the future, Forescan will be capable of flashing module firmware, and I highly discourage users from attempting that using Forescan. I think users should use IDS, and that you have a proper calibration of firmware that you're applying to the module, and that you've done this in the past. Otherwise, I'd try and stay away from this particular feature as much as possible. But in the near future, you're likely going to see this in later builds of Forescan. I just want to let you know what you're looking at on my particular screen. So here I'm going to scroll down to 726-67-02 in the body control module. Again, this line only exists in 2017 and newer BCM firmware in the F150. There's another memory address just above it, which you can use to dictate whether the body control module is looking to see if the circuit is normally open or normally closed. I left everything as it is in that particular line. I only enabled the door Ajar 6 circuit. In this case, I'll pull up the spreadsheet, and when I have that spreadsheet open, I've pre-highlighted the values I'm going to change so I can double check my edits before I actually make them. And then I hop back over into Forescan and I actually write these new changes, or I should say change, to the body control module. When you're done, you can press the stop button to stop your interaction between Forescan and the body control module. Think of it as a safe disconnect, and then you can close the program and just go back to what you're doing. So another quick note I should just add is that my door chime is disabled, and when I disabled my driver door chime, it disables all door chimes. So when the tailgate is actually open, it doesn't make that annoying banging noise that drives us all insane. I have all my door chimes disabled. With the door chimes disabled, the ambient lighting will still turn to a different color, as well as the visual warning which comes up on the productivity screen. So with regards to that particular functionality, the vehicle will still warn me that a particular door is ajar without being extremely annoying. So after programming everything correctly, that takes me back to the little test I showed you in the beginning of the video. Obviously this won't be my setup in the end. I just borrowed chassis ground from the trailer plug for this preliminary test. What I would like to do is, I'll show you in here, is get a magnet switch in behind this plastic on the tailgate. Have the switch with the contacts in behind the plastic, or cut a little hole in the plastic, and then attach the actual magnet to the underside rail of the tonneau cover, because if I put the magnet here, it will tell me tailgate ajar when either the tailgate is open or when the tonneau cover is open. So that's just an idea. I don't know where I'm going to put the switch yet or what type of switch I will use. That's just something I'll have to determine next weekend. So until I can determine how to make best use out of this circuit, I went back into Forescan and I disabled the circuit logically in the BCM. I went back to the circuit itself physically and taped it off, and then I proceeded with zip tying it and tucking it up out of the way. This way, when I develop a concept of how I want to properly wire in whichever switch I ultimately decide to use, I can just go back and easily add it. I hope this video gives you an idea of how you can use Tailgate Ajar to monitor different doors and get it working correctly on your particular Ford vehicle.